political earthquake that just hit Westminster has left Keir Starmer scrambling for cover, while the Prime Minister was busy defending his immigration policies to a sceptical British public. Donald Trump dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through Downing Street. The newly inaugurated president didn't just endorse mass deportations for America. He directly challenged Starmer's approach, calling it weak and dangerous. This isn't just transatlantic political theatre anymore. This is a full-blown crisis that could bring down the Labour government before it even finds its footing. The special relationship between Britain and America, it's hanging by a thread, and Starmer's already fragile grip on power is slipping fast. What Trump said next has every Labour MP checking the polls and updating their CVs. This is the beginning of the end. The timing couldn't be worse for Keir Starmer. Just when he thought he'd survived the first 100 days of scrutiny, just when he believed the criticism over his immigration stance was starting to fade, Trump comes roaring back into the White House with a vengeance. And his first major policy announcement, a massive deportation operation targeting illegal immigrants across the United States. But here's where it gets personal for Starmer. Trump didn't just announce his policy and move on. He made it crystal clear that he sees Britain's current approach as everything that's wrong with Western immigration policy. In a press conference that had journalists frantically scribbling notes, Trump pointed across the Atlantic and said, Britain under Labour leadership has become a cautionary tale of what happens when you prioritise compassion over common sense. Those weren't just throwaway comments. Trump specifically mentioned the surge in small boat crossings in the English Channel, the overcrowded asylum hotels scattered across British towns and cities, and what he called the complete failure to protect borders. He contrasted his tough deportation plan with what he described as Starmer's open door approach. The American president painted a picture of two paths forward for Western democracies. One path, his path, involves strict enforcement, rapid deportations, and zero tolerance for illegal entry. The other path, which he explicitly linked to Starmer's government, leads to social chaos, strained public services, and the erosion of national sovereignty. For Starmer, this isn't just embarrassing international criticism, this is a direct assault on his credibility from the leader of Britain's most important ally. The special relationship that British prime ministers have treasured for decades is now being weaponized against Labour. Trump isn't playing diplomatic games. He's not softening his language or working through back channels. He's going straight to the media, straight to the people, and making Starmer look weak on the world stage. The domestic fallout has been immediate and brutal. Conservative MPs who've been hammering Starmer on immigration for months suddenly have the world's most powerful leader backing up their arguments. Nigel Farage and Reform UK are having a field day, with Farage already calling for Britain to follow Trump's lead and implement similarly tough measures. Even some Labour backbenchers are getting nervous, quietly wondering if their leadership has misjudged the public mood entirely. The polls tell a devastating story. Immigration consistently ranks as one of the top concerns for British voters, and the majority favour stricter control with fossils. Foster processing and, yes, deportations for those who've entered illegally. Starmer's more moderate approach, which emphasises processing claims fairly and treating asylum seekers humanely, is being framed as weakness by his opponents. And now Trump has given that narrative rocket fuel. But there's something even more dangerous brewing beneath the surface. Trump's endorsement of mass deportations isn't just about policy differences, it's about signalling to right-wing movements across the Western world that this is the moment to push hard on immigration. It's about creating permission structures for increasingly tough rhetoric and action. When the American president says deportation on a massive scale is not just acceptable but necessary, it shifts the entire conversation. Suddenly, politicians in Britain, France, Germany and beyond feel emboldened to propose policies that would have been considered too extreme just months ago. Starmer finds himself trapped in a political vice. On one side, he's got Trump and the international right-wing movement painting him as dangerously soft on immigration. On the other side, his own party's left flank is warning him not to abandon Labour's humanitarian principles in response to pressure. The Liberal activists who helped get Labour elected are watching carefully, ready to revolt if Starmer shifts too far toward restrictionist policies. And in the middle, there's the British public, increasingly frustrated with the status quo and wondering why their government seems unable to control the situation. The Channel crossing crisis has become the perfect symbol of everything Trump is criticising. Every day that small boats arrive on British shores, every image of migrants being processed and housed at taxpayer expense, every story of the system being overwhelmed feeds directly into Trump's narrative. The president didn't need to make up problems to attack Starmer. The problems are real, visible, and getting worse. Over 30,000 people crossed the Channel illegally last year, and the numbers show no sign of stopping. The Rwanda deportation scheme, which was supposed to be the Conservative answer to the crisis, has been effectively shelved by Labour. Starmer called it unworkable and inhumane, promising instead to smash the criminal gangs organising the crossings and process claims more efficiently. But months into his premiership, the gangs are still operating, the crossings continue, and processing times remain painfully slow. Trump looked at this situation and saw exactly what he wanted to see: a weak leader making excuses while his country loses control of its borders. The American deportation plan that Trump is championing is ruthlessly simple in concept. Identify individuals in the country illegally, detain them, and remove them to their countries of origin as quickly as possible. Trump has promised to mobilise resources on an unprecedented scale, involving local law enforcement, immigration officials, and even military assets where necessary. He's talking about deportation numbers in the hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, over his term. The legal challenges will be fierce, the logistical hurdles enormous, but Trump is betting that a significant portion of the American public will support decisive action, even if the execution is messy. And here's what terrifies Starmer's team. The polling suggests Trump might be right. When voters are asked directly whether people who entered a country illegally should be deported, majorities in both America and Britain say yes. The sympathy that exists for genuine refugees and asylum seekers doesn't extend to those who've bypassed legal processes entirely. Trump understands this distinction and exploits it relentlessly. He's not attacking people fleeing persecution. He's attacking queue jumpers, rule breakers, and the politicians who enable them. Starmer's response to Trump's challenge has been cautious to the point of timidity. In a brief statement, the Prime Minister's office said that Britain makes its own decisions about immigration policy based on its values and circumstances. They emphasised the importance of the UK-US relationship while noting that the two countries have different systems and challenges, and that's it. That's the fighting response from Downing Street. To being called out by the American president as an example of failed leadership, the Conservative opposition immediately pounced, accusing Starmer of being too afraid to defend his policies or too embarrassed to admit they're not working. The weakness of Starmer's response reveals a deeper problem. He doesn't have a compelling counter-narrative. He can't point to declining channel crossings because they're not declining. He can't boast about efficient processing because the backlog remains massive. He can't claim that his approach is popular because the polls say otherwise. So instead, he retreats into bland statements about values and processes, hoping the controversy will blow over. But Trump isn't letting this blow over. The American president has discovered that attacking Starmer plays well with his base and causes chaos in British politics without any real cost to US interests. Why would Trump stop now? Behind closed doors, Labour strategists are in full panic mode. They're running scenarios about what happens if Trump keeps up this pressure throughout his term. Every few months, whenever immigration becomes a hot topic in America, Trump could take a shot at Britain's approach and put Starmer back on the defensive. The cumulative effect could be devastating, constantly reminding British voters that their Prime Minister is seen as weak by America's leader. Some Labour MPs are privately advocating for a policy shift, arguing that Starmer needs to adopt tougher measures to neutralise the issue. They point to other European leaders who've moved right on immigration and survived politically. Denmark's Social Democrats, for example, implemented strict policies and maintained power. But Starmer knows that any significant shift would trigger a civil war within Labour and potentially shatter the coalition that brought him to power. The immigration debate has always been Labour's Achilles heel, the issue where the party's activist base and the broader electorate are most misaligned. Trump has just stomped on that heel with both feet. The international implications extend far beyond the Starmer-Trump relationship. Other world leaders are watching carefully to see what happens when a Western democracy tries to maintain moderate immigration policies in the face of populist pressure. If Starmer folds and shifts toward mass deportation policies, it sends a signal that the Trump approach is the only politically viable option. If Starmer holds firm but loses power in the next election, it sends the same signal. Either way, the window for centrist positions on immigration seems to be closing rapidly. Starmer's doomed status isn't guaranteed, but the trajectory is alarming. He's losing the narrative battle, both at home and internationally. Trump's backing of mass deportation has made aggressive enforcement the mainstream position on the right, pulling the centre of gravity away from Starmer's preferred middle ground. The longer this drags on without a clear Labour success story on immigration, the harder it becomes to recover. Elections may be years away, but political momentum is built or destroyed in moments like this. Right now, Starmer looks like a leader without answers, attacked from Washington, undermined at home, and unable to articulate why his approach deserves support. The British public is watching a Prime Minister struggle to respond to legitimate concerns about immigration while being publicly humiliated by an ally. That's not a recipe for political longevity. The Conservative Party, which spent months floundering after their election defeat, has suddenly found renewed purpose. They've got a clear attack line that writes itself. Starmer is so weak on immigration that even America's president has called him out. Vote Conservative to restore control of our borders and our standing in the world. It's simple, it's devastating. And thanks to Trump, it comes with international validation. Even voters who don't particularly like Trump might agree with his basic criticism that Britain has lost control of its immigration system. The media cycle has been brutal for Starmer. Every news outlet is covering the Trump comments. Every panel show is debating whether he's right. Every radio phone in is flooded with callers expressing frustration about immigration. Starmer's attempt to move past the issue and focus on other priorities like the economy and public services has been completely derailed. Immigration is back at the top of the agenda, and it's back in the worst possible way for Labour. What makes this crisis particularly dangerous for Starmer is that it's exposing fractures within his own coalition. Labour won the last election with support from diverse groups, including progressive urbanites who want compassionate immigration policies, traditional working class voters concerned about community cohesion and public services, and practical centrists focused on economic management. Trump's attack and the subsequent debate are forcing these groups to choose sides on an issue where their interests don't align. The progressive wing wants Starmer to stand firm against Trump's rhetoric and maintain humanitarian principles. The working class constituencies want action to reduce immigration numbers and restore a sense of control. The centrists want pragmatic solutions that work regardless of ideology. Starmer can't satisfy all three groups simultaneously, which means his coalition is fracturing before our eyes. Some Labour-held seats with particular concerns about immigration are looking increasingly vulnerable. If Reform UK or even the Conservatives can make credible claims that they'll follow Trump's lead and implement tough deportation policies, they could peel away voters who switched to Labour last time but are having second thoughts. Starmer's margin of safety in Parliament is large, but parliamentary majorities mean nothing if public opinion turns decisively against you. The Trump factor adds an unpredictable element to British politics. American presidential influence over UK domestic debates isn't new, but it's rarely been this direct and this hostile toward a sitting Prime Minister. Trump has essentially made Starmer a punching bag for international audiences, and that diminishes Britain's standing as well as Labour's popularity. The special relationship was supposed to protect British leaders from this kind of treatment, but Trump has never cared about diplomatic norms. He sees Starmer as ideologically opposed to his worldview and politically vulnerable, which makes him an irresistible target. Looking forward, Starmer's options are all bad. He could attempt to out-tough Trump by proposing his own mass deportation scheme, but that would betray Labour values, spark internal rebellion, and look like desperate pandering. He could dig in and defend his current approach, but without results to point to. That's just stubbornness in the face of failure. He could try to change the subject entirely, but immigration is too important and too visible to ignore. Or he could gamble on Trump's attention moving elsewhere, hoping the pressure eases naturally. That last option is probably what Downing Street is banking on, but it's a passive strategy that leaves Starmer looking weak and reactive. The deportation debate is also forcing Britain to confront uncomfortable questions about what it actually wants. Do British people support the idea of forcibly removing tens of thousands of individuals who entered the country illegally, even if some of them have been here for years, have jobs, have children in schools? The abstract concept of border control is popular, but the reality of mass deportation operations, with their inevitable human stories and images, might be far more controversial. Trump is betting that Americans will accept the harsh reality in exchange for perceived security and order. Starmer seems to be betting that Britons won't stomach such measures, but he's never actually tested that proposition, and now he might not get the chance to find out on his own terms. The political doom facing Starmer isn't about a single policy failure. It's about a comprehensive loss of authority on an issue that voters care deeply about. Trump's intervention has crystallised and amplified existing concerns, giving permission to critics to attack more aggressively and encouraging voters to question whether Labour is up to the job. In politics, perception becomes reality quickly. If enough people believe Starmer is doomed on immigration, then he's doomed on immigration regardless of what policies he actually implements. The narrative has escaped his control, and regaining it will require something dramatic that hasn't yet appeared on the horizon. As this crisis unfolds, one thing becomes clear. The Trump-Starmer clash over mass deportation isn't just a foreign policy dispute or a difference in governing philosophy. It's a defining moment that could determine whether Starmer survives as Prime Minister or becomes another cautionary tale about the price of getting immigration wrong. Trump has placed his bet on toughness and deportation. Starmer is stuck defending a status quo that isn't working. And the British public is watching, judging, and increasingly wondering if change is needed. The breaking point is coming, and when it arrives, Starmer might find that sympathy is in much shorter supply than the patience that's already run out. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.